The briefing is brought to you in association with Spain. From the wilds of the Atlantic to the warmth of Mediterranean isles, the Spanish coast has something for every occasion. And whether chartering a yacht or renting a more modest motorboat, there's no better way to explore this magical country's lesser-known highlights than from the open water. Listen out for a new summer season of The Concierge on Monocle Radio. Join Robert Bound and friends as they turn navigator for an unforgettable journey along the Spanish coast. From hidden gems to legendary gastronomy, and with the unique drama of the America's Cup in the host city of Barcelona added to the mix, discover why the time is right to take to the waves. The Concierge, returning to Monocle Radio in July. This summer, set sail for Spain.
You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 23rd of August 2024 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Ahead on today's programme,
what has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost.
Kamala Harris closed the Democratic National Convention last night. We'll have analysis of her speech. The America's Cup is approaching. We'll get details of the oldest competition in international sport. We'll be discussing shoes, jewellery and window displays in our design roundup. And
put your hands out.
Both.
You have to have both. And
What?
We'll find out what prompted that reaction from the president of Botswana. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. The Democratic National Convention wrapped up last night in Chicago with Kamala Harris, the vice president and presidential nominee, being received with rapturous applause. She spoke of being a leader for the people.
I will be a president who unites us around our highest aspirations. A president who leads and listens, who is realistic, practical, and has common sense, and always fights for the American people.
She also took on the contentious issue of Gaza.
Desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
I mean, just listen to that applause. Charles Hecker, who's a senior partner at Control Risks, author of the upcoming book Zero Sum on International Business in Russia, joining me listening to that, Charles. Extraordinary.
That's right. A major applause line and one of the biggest receptions in her 40-minute speech at the Democratic National Convention, culminating 4 days of Democratic vibe in Chicago, and a discussion of all of the lines that a politician, and particularly a presidential candidate, has to walk. Israel-Gaza is razor sharp. And what she's trying to do here is support both sides of the argument for critical constituencies in what is also going to be a razor sharp and razor thin election. And so while she didn't say explicitly anything about a two-state solution, by talking about self-determination and security for Palestinians, she seemed to be supportive of that sort of policy in the Middle East.
I mean, she made history last night.
That's right. She did, although it's interesting. I think the vice president is steering cautiously away from casting herself as a candidate of firsts. And I think that might be because that there is an implicit level of risk in saying that you're the first kind of something or the first kind of anything. All of that said, of course, the atmosphere, the speakers, the ocean of white outfits in the convention hall during her speech, white, of course, being the color of the suffragette movement and wearing white, which the vice president didn't do during her acceptance speech. But since so many women in the audience were, it was there for everybody to see that this was indeed a history-making candidacy.
She also told the audience some of her own personal story.
That's right. This is a campaign that is going to boil down, among everything else, to character and to identity, to morals and to ethics. And by casting her, first of all, by letting people know a little bit more about who she is, because vice presidents typically don't get much of the spotlight during their tenure. So that's number one. But number two, what she's doing in talking about her immigrant roots, but also her very American story, she's drawing a contrast in character to the Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump, and hoping that by judging her character, referring to the way she was raised and her mother, the scientist, and her father, the professor, that by drawing that sort of portrait, she's drawing a contrast with her opponent.
And very much middle class, playing to the middle ground.
That's right. There was an audience filled with union representatives, and to the extent that she did dabble in policy statements during her speech, very, very strong pro-labor candidate, and also had a speaker from, I believe, the UAW, the United Auto Workers, featured in day 3 of the convention.
Now, she has been criticized for being light on policy.
That's right. Well, two things. First of all, this entire campaign so far has been pretty light on policy, both from the Republican side and so far from the Democratic side. The problem with the convention is the minute you say something like the word fracking in a convention speech, anybody who's watching on television turns off, and anybody who's sitting in the hall feels like they want to head for the exits. The convention's not necessarily the time to do that. What she did was she ticked all of the important boxes, and she talked about affordable health care, and she talked about housing, and she talked about childcare, and she talked about reducing taxes. So she ticked the boxes quickly. In the rest of the campaign, once the post-convention euphoria fades, she will have to talk about what she's going to do, what kind of president she's going to be, and how she's going to run the country.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about how this is about identity and how she differs from Trump on this. How will she take the fight to Trump, and how has he reacted to her speech?
Well, he reacted very, very poorly. In fact, he called Fox News during Vice President Harris's acceptance speech live. They took him on the air for what they thought would be a 10-minute slot, and the president just wouldn't stop talking.
What did he say?
Well, he goes incredibly off message. What he tried to do was rebut things that Vice President Harris was saying point by point, almost literally as she was saying it. He was sort of live tweeting on the air. Fox News tried to interrupt him and tried to get him off the air, and he wouldn't go. And at some point, they had to switch over to an entirely different television show to cut the president's live feed off. And he is responding to her with increasing attacks on her personally. You heard him a couple of days ago say that he thinks he's a better looking candidate than Vice President Harris. I mean, this is not really where you want to be going in a presidential candidacy. And she's going to take it to him when she gets the moment. This is the prosecutor versus the felon.
Yeah.
And that's going to be her take on all of this going forward.
Now, Charles, obviously we've seen her popularity increase since she's taken on the candidacy. But have there been any polls since that event?
There haven't, and I think that this is a function of the fact that it's just still too early. There will be polls coming out of the convention to show the post-convention high, and there have been predictions that the polls will show a double-digit lead. In contrast to President Trump. I mean, when you think about it, this is a candidacy from the Democratic Party that made an absolutely Alpine-style hairpin turn a month and a day before Vice President Harris made last night's speech. And so for her to turn this ship around and to be entering the convention at least neck and neck with President Trump, there'll be quite a lot of polls coming out, I think, that will want to show a substantial spike following the convention.
Can she keep it up?
This is the $60 million question. She has about 8 weeks. to do it. She's got a good head of steam. The convention went well. I mean, I think that no matter what your political affiliation and no matter what sort of spin you want to put on it, it was a good show. And she has, the wind at her back.
Charles Ecker, thank you very much indeed. Now, here's Laura Kramer with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Kyiv today for talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The visit comes just weeks after Modi's trip to Moscow. India has called for a ceasefire and peace in Ukraine, but has not condemned Russia's invasion. In Sudan, a convoy of humanitarian aid has reached Darfur, providing temporary relief after parts of the border with Chad were closed by Sudanese forces. More than a dozen trucks have brought food to help around 13,000 people facing famine in western Darfur. And the Australian Senate has passed a motion supporting Taiwan's sovereignty and its participation in international organizations. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has welcomed this move, calling it just. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thank you, Laura. The preliminary regattas of the 37th edition of the America's Cup set sail on August the 22nd, and the main race, contested by 6 teams, runs from October the 12th to the 27th. It's the oldest competition in international sport. Well, Paul Streletsky is a marine business specialist. He joins us now from Barcelona. Paul, welcome to the show. Can you give us the history of this very storied competition?
Well, it dates back to 1851, where a yacht from the USA raced a lot of British yachts around the Isle of Wight and won. They took it back to the US, and it was then named the America's Cup, the 100 Guineas Cup as it was known at the time, the trophy made by Garrard. And ever since then, nations from across the world have been racing to capture that America's Cup. Unfortunately, in Britain, we've never won it. So the Ben Ainsley team, Ineos Britannia, are fighting to win it this time.
You sound like you could be on a boat now. I wonder if you'd just move away from that very loud woman we can hear in the background. There are various heats, Paul, that lead up to the main event. Just tell us how that works.
All the competing nations, there are 5 nations trying to wrest the cup back from New Zealand, and they all have to race each other, and then the top 4 go into the semi-finals, and then the top 2 into the final, and then that winner then goes up against New Zealand in October on the dates you mentioned to fight for the America's Cup.
And what type of vessels typically take part?
These are the highest tech racing yachts in anywhere on the planet. They're 75 foot long. They don't race with the hull in the water. They have very high-tech foils that basically they are flying across the water any speeds up to 90 knots per mile per hour.
What is the route that they take now?
It's a short course. Each race only lasts about 25 minutes. They basically go up to the top mark against the wind, and then they come down with the wind behind them. It's all very fast, very exciting, and the weather here in Barcelona is a beautiful, hot, sunny afternoon with plenty of breeze.
Paul, sponsorship is always a big thing in this competition. The boats are emblazoned with business names. Just tell us a little bit about that side of it as a marketing opportunity.
It's a big one. I mean, people compare it to Formula One, which is a lot bigger. The audience is bigger, but this is very upscale. There are so many sponsors. Emirates sponsor Team New Zealand, Ineos, under the guise of Jim Radcliffe. They're the sponsor and the backer of Ineos, Ben Ainsley's team from the UK. You have Red Bull are involved with Alinghi, and in fact the British team, they are involved with Mercedes F1 as well. The design team works with Mercedes F1. And then the event itself, there are brands like Estrella Damm, who are based here in Barcelona, the beer, Puig, the fashion brand, are involved. Louis Vuitton is probably the biggest name now, and the actual Challenger Series and the America's Cup is sponsored by them. So a lot of major brands are involved.
Who's the favourite to win?
I think Team New Zealand are probably still the favourites, but everyone reckons it's going to be very tight. The first races were yesterday. Team New Zealand won. Unfortunately, Ineos Britannia wasn't able to win. So it's a game on for the next races, which start very soon, which is why I'm on the water.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. That's Paul Strelecki. And Monocle's special episode of The Concierge, live from Barcelona on the America's Cup, is available to listen to now on monocle.com/radio. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. I'm Georgina Godwin, and we'll look further now at the creative scene with the design writer Samantha Say, who is an editor and a consultant as well as being a writer. Samantha, welcome back to the programme. Can we start discussing this digital shoe brand?
Of course. Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me back.
It's actually launching a physical product.
Yes. So Pet Liger is launching its physical product called the Love Heels. Love Heels came out around Valentine's Day, and it's this red stacked heel with hearts. And it was such a popular heel that they've decided to make its first physical product. And pre-sales have been going strong, and they've started production now. They're actually just going to be making enough for whoever bought during the pre-sale so that it ensures sustainability and reducing excess. It's going to be made with this beautiful artisanal leather alongside some futuristic translucent resin, and it's definitely a statement piece.
Mm-hmm. And so is the company expanding into wholesale now?
So I think, that's definitely what they're aiming to do. So they're going to do the first sort of drop, if you will, with people online, with their community, and then they're going into wholesale, and they're wanting to launch into, luxury department stores such as Selfridges and Harrods, and I believe that's already in the works.
Mm-hmm. Now, they were tapped by Gucci to reimagine their heritage, weren't they? This was an NFT auction.
Yes, that was, I believe, 2 years ago. And so they were one of, I think, 9 artists that worked with NFTs. And so, it's a really great evolution of the brand, having worked, first with, their digital imprint and then being tapped by Gucci. And now there's been such a demand that they are going to launch a physical product.
Excellent. Well, let's now look at Cartier and a new addition to the Cartier Libre collection. Tell us about Tutti Tutti.
Oh, I'm so excited. So Tutti Tutti is launching on September 1st. And as you said, it's a new addition to the Cartier Libre collection. So this collection comes out every year, and it's designed by the in-house team. And it pays homage to the iconic Tutti Frutti collection from the 1930s, which was inspired by Indian royalty and the country's stone carving techniques. So the Tutti Frutti collection remains one of the brand's most recognized and beloved collections, and continues to to grab really high prices at auction. Earlier this year, there was a necklace that was sold at Christie's in Hong Kong for $8.7 million, almost doubling its estimate. So this collection that's upcoming, that's launching in September, is paying homage to the Tutti Frutti collection. So the melon cut aesthetic is going to be a dominant aesthetic that you see throughout the collection. This motif can be seen on rings, on bracelets, and they have this incredible, stunning jewelry box where the crown piece is going to be a melon cut jewel. So I can't wait for that to come out.
It sounds beautiful. Finally, let's talk about window dressing, basically.
Yes, of course. So London Design Festival has just released its programming, and what I think is going to be really exciting is the collaboration between Fortnum & Masons and the designer and artist Jaime Ion. So he is celebrating the studio's 25th anniversary, and he will be doing a series of installations that will be showcased at Fortnum & Mason's windows. There's also going to be an installation that's going to be in the iconic atrium inside.
And what will that look like? Do we know yet?
Yeah, we know a little bit. I know that they're waiting for the big reveal. We do know that in the windows, there's going to be an installation called Celebration 1. And it's going to be a retrospective of his signature aesthetic, really bright hues. It's going to be moving silhouettes. They're going to be playful beasts in like various materials, including ceramics, bronze, glass, and wood. So that's going to be displayed throughout the store windows at the main Fortnum & Macy's on Piccadilly. Now, there's going to be a laser cut installation that will hang inside the atrium, and that one is called Malabarista. I don't know too much about the aesthetics so far, but I do know it's going to be absolutely stunning.
Samantha, thank you very much indeed. That's Samantha Say, and this is The Briefing on Monocle Radio. A 2,492-carat raw diamond discovered in Botswana could be the second largest gem quality example ever unearthed. The Canadian mining company Lucara Diamond Corp said it had recovered the exceptional stone from its Koroe diamond mine, with a photo showing the hefty rough diamond sitting in the cupped palm of a hand. Well, joining me now is Tobias Cormand, who's managing director of 77 Diamonds. He joins me now in the studio. Welcome, Tobias.
Hi, thank you for having me.
What does 2,492 carats look like? I mean, how big is it? What are we talking?
That's 2 tennis balls next to each other. It's enormous.
That's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely huge.
So it's half a kilo in weight.
The previous biggest discovery in Botswana was, I think, 1,758 carats. It was found at the same mine. Why is Botswana the place where large diamonds seem to be found?
Yeah, so so the question is this one of the most extraordinary collection of large stones, or is it the technology that Lucara is deploying? So they've invented a kind of X-ray technology, which if you go back in time, diamonds were found, as they were digging, they were crushing, and normally they'd find like pieces of a larger diamond that had crushed and destroyed, enormous amount of value. But with this technology, they're actually able to find the stones and carefully dig around to be able to extract them. So this is the first time. But I think this is one of the richest deposits that we've seen in the history of time. I mean, there's been 5 stones pulled up since 2015, over 1,000 carats, which is totally unprecedented in the history of digging for diamonds.
What is a carat? How do you measure a carat?
So the carat actually comes from a carob seed, which was 0.2 of a gram. So if you've got a 5 carat, that's 1 gram basically in weight. They're quite light diamonds, and that's where it comes from.
What will happen with the stone now? I mean, it is so large. Obviously, you can't, wear it as a necklace. How long?
You can knock somebody out with it.
How long before we see jewels adorned with bits of it?
Yeah, so I think, right now the diamond market's actually a bit depressed in terms of pricing. So we've seen quite a bit of a decline over the last few years. So luxury's come off the boil, demand from China. And then we've had this extraordinary wave of lab-grown diamonds as well, which has hit the market, being produced and in large quantities. And actually there's quite big consumer demand for it. So prices are depressed, which means that they're probably not in a rush to sell this stone. They're going to kind of wait for perhaps a better period of time where diamond prices are a little bit more on the up, because something like this needs to be managed very carefully. And what we're going to see is so they've made a mistake. Lucara joined up with Sotheby's back in 2016 and put the Lecce La Rona, which was a 1,100 carat rough diamond, which was marketed as, because that was the first big over 1,000 carat diamond that came out of this mine, and they marketed it as an extraordinary opportunity to own a once in a lifetime. And now we've seen 5 since then, and that didn't actually sell at auction and ended up going to Graf, who's sitting with it and cutting it, into pieces. But so I think they're gonna they've learned their lesson and not bring it out to the entire market. So they're gonna speak to all the, they're gonna be talking to the leading luxury jewelry manufacturers to see if there's any interest. They're gonna be talking to some of the leading diamond cutting houses who have experience in purchasing large, expensive stones. There might be consortiums of people buying this, and then the cutting would probably happen over 6 to 12 months as well.
Right.
So,
Now, I mean, this was found by a Canadian company, but the name one normally associates, particularly with Botswana, is De Beers. Now, De Beers is currently up for sale, and I wonder what this means for basically Lucara's rival.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think De Beers and Lucara are. I mean, they are in the same kind of space, but Lucara focuses on, they have smaller mining assets. I mean, De Beers controls something like 35 to 38% of the global volume. Lucara is significantly smaller than that, and they're looking for these, smaller quantity but larger stones. So they're not really a direct rival. I mean, De Beers is supplying such a huge quantity into the market. But I think, first of all, it's good that there is excitement about this. I mean, it's kind of everyone's talking about it. It's extraordinary. And so natural diamonds is maybe back on, natural diamonds has got to come up with a fight back against lab-grown diamonds. So I think overall for the industry, having a talking point like this is really positive, number one. And number two, I mean, where De Beers is going is actually a big question. So they were the ones that kind of invented the slogans "Diamond is forever." They hired a marketing agency back in the 40s, and as a result of that, the modern day demand for diamond engagement rings, is with us and is inbuilt into social culture. So I think De Beers has a very, traditionally has a very important history, and it really needs to kind of find its footing, and a new owner that will take hand of it and be able to invest in it the way that it needs to be done. But first, we kind of need to see a diamond price recovery, because I think everyone in the diamond industry that's grabbing them out of the ground, besides perhaps Lucara, is really struggling at the moment to kind of justify the economics.
Because the Oppenheimer family have actually been very good at ploughing proceeds back into the Botswana economy.
Right, but the Oppenheimers sold out, so Anglo-American bought the remaining shares of theirs out, and it's De Beers is now fully owned by Anglo-American, beyond some relationships with some governments which have stakes in various things. So the Oppenheimers were visionary and extremely good at carrying that torch forward, and now there's no one actually carrying that torch. The only other large player in the market is Alrosa, which is sitting in Russia, and obviously there's a sanctions ban against Russian diamonds, and so that part of the market is not talking to this part of the market. Sure. And actually they're selling to very different people now as well.
I just have to ask you about security before you go. I mean, how is this going to be looked after?
Well, so there's it's an interesting question and a funny story. So there's a few rumors about how the Cullinan diamond, which was the largest discovery, that is the largest rough diamond ever discovered at 3,100 carats. So there was a whole big entourage that, with soldiers that transported on boat, and they were all armed and so on. And it was a ruse. They were not carrying the actual diamond. So there's two theories. One is that the Asher family that ended up cutting the Cullinan, put it in his jacket pocket and sewed it up and carried it back to his home to cut it, basically, at the time in Antwerp. And the alternative story that we don't know which is true, and these are like urban myths now, was that it was actually sent by post. Shipped by post, just in an ordinary box, through to its destination.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I was at school with the grand niece of the person, Cullinan, who found it, and she goes by the post theory.
She goes by the post theory, and it's extraordinary. But yeah, I mean, the security on this is obviously going to be incredibly tight. But I think, Lucara is used to handling and dealing with large diamonds, so I don't think anyone's going to be getting to it anytime soon.
Tobias, thank you so much for coming in. Next time, you have to bring us some diamonds to play with, though.
Absolutely, I will.
That was Tobias Coleman, who is Managing Director of 77 Diamonds. And that's all for this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Tom Webb. Our researcher was Sana Jamani, and our studio manager was Steph Chungu. The Briefing's back on Monday at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.